Hello, I'm Li Hao. So today I'm gonna explain module bundlers at 3 levels, and I'm gonna invite my 3 cute little furry friends to come and role play for me at 3 levels: a junior engineer, senior engineer, and expert engineer. I'm gonna try to explain module bundlers at different levels to them. Module bundlers are the cornerstones of building modern web applications. Whether you know it or not, you have been using them directly or indirectly. If you are examples of module bundlers like webpack, rollup, vite, snowpack, but you may have been using them indirectly through meta frameworks such as Vite, Next.js, Nux.js, or Gatsby. They are under the hood powering these meta frameworks. So you have been using them directly or indirectly. Oh, hello! Hey! So, do you know anything about module bundlers? No? Sure, let me explain it to you. Right, so, say imagine you have a website and that has a script over here. If you want to use a function that is defined in another script, what would you do? You would copy it? Copy it? Well, then I have 2 copies of the same code to maintain. I don't want that. I want to reuse the function from another script file. Or you will import it? Well, funny thing is that as soon as you use the word import, you're treating a script file as a standalone reusable unit, a module. Right? For a module to share function to other modules to import it, you would have to export it. And we can choose to import or use whichever exported functions. And these don't just work yet, right? You know, in browsers, I need to change the HTML script tag type to module because it was default as classic JavaScript previously, which does not support the keyword import or export. So now it becomes a JavaScript module. Right, so I suppose I need to support browser that does not support JS module. What should I do? We are talking about module bundlers today, right? So I'm afraid it's gonna come back to something relates to that. Right, so we will go back to the idea of copying. We were talking about idea of copying the code, the multiply function, and paste it into the index.js, right? But instead of manually copying, you should leave the job to a tool to automatically do it for us, right? And that's kind of what a module bundler do. It takes in module, figure out how module imports each other, and then it stitches them together in a file, which results in a script file that kind of looks like the same of you copying piece of everything in each modules and then pasting together in one file, right? So it end up similar, but it's actually done by a tool automatically, and that's what a module bundler do. Is that clear? Right, I hope you understand that. So see ya, bye bye. Say hi to the camera. I believe you are a senior engineer, right? And I believe you understand how module bundler works. Do you? No? So you know what a module bundler is, right? Yes. So in any web application, there's always a starting point. It's the first module to run, and it's also usually it's the one that imports other modules and run them. So the starting modules depends on these modules, so we can call these modules as the dependency of the starting module, right? And them themselves may have other dependencies, right? So module bundler is a tool that takes in the starting module and its dependencies, and then it generates a JavaScript file that representing all these modules, right? So you can just run that JavaScript file that is generated. It's the same as running JavaScript module in a browser which imports this dependency. So if you take a step down to look at how it works, there's 2 steps, right? The first step is called a dependency resolution. It starts from the starting module. The module bundlers reads the module, figure out its dependency, mainly by finding import statements. Right? So with all the import statements, it found the dependency. The next step is that it will go to this dependency and repeat the process again until it reaches just the dead end, right? Which means you reach a module that does not have any dependency, right? So now you have a clear idea of all the dependencies you needed for this module. right? And the next step is bundle them, right? You take this relationship of all the modules and you combine them into one file, which is the bundle. Does that sound easy to you? Oh yeah, you have a great question. So how about importing CSS files, right? CSS files, you can import them as CSS modules, right? So one missing step we have over here is that most module bundler has this concept called a loader or transformer. So whenever a module bundler found a module, before reading the file to figure out the import statements, it actually goes through this loader or transformer function to transform the code into JavaScript code. And now, because it's a valid JavaScript code, you can read it to find the import statements, and also that JavaScript code will be bundled into the final output. So it will be part of the bundled code which can be run by the browser, right? Well, yes. So how does CSS turns into JavaScript? Oh, we probably will talk about that more in depth in a later video. But maybe the high level, the transformer itself can write the CSS into a separate file, and the so-called JavaScript file that we transform into can be just a JavaScript code that adds a link tag to links to that CSS file. And that's all it needs to do, right? That's what we are expecting. Importing CSS will be actually adding CSS into our browser through link tags. So did you learn something today? Well, that's good to hear. So we probably glazed through a lot of details over here, right? The high level idea you need to know is we resolve dependency, transform the module, and bundle them. But in each of these steps, there's a lot of details to go through, right? Which is not going to cover in this video. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and then get notified so that you will learn them in the future videos, okay? Okay, that's good. So, you're the expert engineer, eh? So is that why you're sleeping? You get people work for you? Oh no, because there's a lot of meetings. Huh. Interesting. So you know what we're going to talk about today? Module bundlers, right? So you've overheard everyone how I explain to everyone else. Okay, so how about that? Since I guess you get a lot of meetings, you don't get to write a lot of code, you don't get to read code. How about let's just dive into the code itself into 3 different bundlers, webpack, rollup, and vite. And let's take a look in terms of how they bundle the code, right? So all of these 3, they start the same, right? They resolve the dependency, figuring out like what are the modules that it needs. And then when they do the bundling, it's where they're different from each other. So let's take a look at 3 examples and let's figure out how are they different from each other. Does that sound right? Okay, cool. So here what you're looking at is sample that I took the liberty to prepare ahead of time. So here, this is my entry file, the source index.js. It imports a few classes such as the sum and the product. All of them are importing from these utility files, as well as some data and some CSS. Okay, so here I've prepared 2 configurations for the module bundlers. For vite, I think all the necessary defaults is good enough. So for webpack, what I did for it is to do some de-optimization for demo purposes. Okay, so here let me run webpack build. It's done. Might as well build for rollup as well. rollup.config.js. Okay, so I've built both of them. So for vite, we will take a look at that later on. So let me open this folder. I have the rollup build and the webpack build. So let's take a look at the webpack build first. So here what you probably see if you scroll all the way down is this. You can find this looks like our entry file, right? Of course, it's there's some resemblance if you try to look hard enough, right? This is our entry file. Let me open a split view. So this is our entry file. We importing from some product data utils, and here you see that webpack does some transformation, but you can still basically see the structure of the code over here, right? So over here, this webpack require is webpack's runtime, right? So webpack defines this function, and if you search for this string over here, you find that this is a key of an object, and this object is called the webpack modules, right? So this object keeps a key, which is the module itself, and a function as the value, right? So each function, we try to look kind enough, this is the product, right? So if you look at the product, source product.js file, the content of this, the code we have over here is over here, right? Except with some transformation where again we see webpack require and then source util.js, right? So webpack's, the way webpack bundles is that it tries to create a map of the module as a key and then the module itself as a value. And with all this map, after the map you have, this pass into the webpack require, which is the webpack runtime itself, which does gluing all the modules together, right? So this is how a webpack bundle looks like. Of course, webpack will do some optimization for a simple application like this, where it tries to concatenate all the modules together, and if you remove the optimization code, you probably will see that maybe the modules map will have maybe only one entry with everything become like just like one module, right? So that is some sort of optimization that we disable so that you can clearly see that each module is a key, is an entry to this webpack modules object. So let's take a look at the rollup bundle, shall we? At first glance, you'll see that it's very different from webpack's bundle, right? So rollup bundle, you'll see that there's no mapping, there's no map, and everything kinds of flatten out into one file, right? This is like what I said earlier on, where you feel like it's like copy pasting code into one file, right? This is how rollup bundles things up together, right? It tries to lay out all the files together, and of course there's some sorting involved. You see again the entry file is at the very bottom, and since when we are running this entry file, we probably would need entry module, we probably would need sum and product. So sum and product class will have to come before this entry module rather than after, right? And as well, since this uses multiply and add, you'll see that these functions will be up ahead before this class is being defined, right? So rollup itself will actually sorts the modules in some sort of topological order such that you get what runs, the dependency will come before the module itself, right? So this is how rollup and webpack differs from each other. So lastly, let's take a look at vite, shall we? So let's run the vite dev server. So vite runs on a premise that in development mode, almost all front-end developers, in like 99% of the time, we develop in modern browsers, right? Of course, in some of the times, we probably would want to debug certain edge cases on legacy browsers, but most of us uses modern browser, and modern browser supports module out of the box, right? So we don't need to do bundling, like we don't have to bundle all of them into one file during development mode. So if you open this, and we inspect, what you see is that, okay, let me refresh so that we load everything again. What you see is that vite will load our code over here, and this is our entry module, right? So okay, so let me show you one thing I forgot to say is that I have this one index.html file over here that is script type module and then loading the source index.js module, right? This is our entry module. So over here, when we load the entry module, you'll see that this code being written. So this is our entry module, exactly the same. not quite, not really. If you look hard enough, again, this is not really exactly our entry module. So if you look at this import statements over here, we didn't write this, we didn't write source sum, we write a .sum.js. So vite actually does some transformation, but it's on a per module basis. It does so such that it basically resolves the module. So because there's a lot of ways to write, later on when we learn about resolving modules, you realize that we can actually have aliases, we can have symlinks, we can import from node modules, right? So vite actually resolves them and then replace the path over here, so that you see over here, and so that the browser will know where to fetch this file, right? And yeah, so the browser will actually fetch module by module. So we don't bundle the modules together, but rather we serve module by module, a transformed module to the browser, and browser takes charge to loads the module. And one great thing about that is also, if you only change one module, you don't have to generate a new bundle, but rather because of the browser caching, browser knows that which module to fetch for, and then it will only fetch those modules. For vite case, I want to show an example what happens if you import a CSS file, right? So we have a CSS file over here, and we're importing CSS file. So if you look over here, let me refresh again, you'll see that browser will fetch, you'll see that this will resolve to a CSS file, and when you fetch that file, it's actually not a CSS file that's being written, right? So this is, if you look at the response header, this is still a JavaScript file, although the extension or whatever tells you it's a CSS, but actually the content type is JavaScript, and this is a legit JavaScript file, which adds a style tag to the body with the content of the CSS. Right, so this is similar to the idea of having like a loader or transformer in our module bundler. It transforms the module such that it turns it into a JavaScript module such that the module bundlers can understand, and in this case, it transforms it such that the browser can understand and can load it. So how do you find it? Too many code? You feel too sleepy reading all of them? Yeah, me too. I guess that's it then. Bye! So even though module bundlers were created at a time where browser do not support modules natively, but module bundlers isn't going away anytime soon. Native CSS modules or asset modules is still at a very early stage, and we still have an unsolved challenge about loading bottlenecks with a lot of modules right now. So we'll leave this as it is in this video, and we're gonna explore more in depth in the next one. So see you till next time. Bye bye.